I found my own missing person poster in my guardian's closet. The missing person poster was folded neatly between Aunt Margaret's winter sweaters, like a bookmark she'd placed there and forgotten. Except the face staring back at me was mine, 7 years younger, gap-toothed, wearing a Batman t-shirt I didn't remember owning. Missing, Jamie Collins, age 6. Collins. Not Morrison, like I'd been told my whole life. The poster was dated September 15, 2014, exactly 10 years ago. My hands shook as I unfolded the yellowed paper completely, revealing details that made my stomach drop through the floor. Last seen at Riverside Park with family. Brown hair, green eyes, 42 inches tall. Distinctive birthmark on left shoulder blade. I twisted around instinctively, even though I couldn't see the crescent-shaped mark that had always been there, that Margaret always said proved I was born under a lucky moon. The same birthmark described on this poster of a missing child. Of me. I'd only been looking for Margaret's heating pad. She'd asked me to grab it for her back while she was downstairs making dinner. The closet had always been off-limits, but after 11 years of living here, I figured I'd earned the right to help myself to basic medical supplies. Now I wished I'd never opened that door. The contact information listed a Detective Morrison. Was that where my fake last name came from? And a phone number with a 304 area code. West Virginia. Below that, a reward amount that made my knees weak, $50,000. $50,000. Someone had cared enough about 6-year-old me to offer $50,000 for my safe return. Jamie, honey, did you find it? Margaret's voice drifted up from the kitchen, warm and concerned like always. The same voice that had read me bedtime stories, taught me to ride a bike, held me through nightmares about parents I supposedly couldn't remember because they died when I was too young. The same voice that had been lying to me for over a decade. I stuffed the poster into my jacket pocket and grabbed the heating pad, my mind racing. All those stories about the car accident that killed my parents. About how Margaret, my father's sister, had taken me in out of pure love when no one else would. About how the trauma had made me block out most of my early memories. All lies. In the kitchen, Margaret was stirring something that smelled like beef stew, my favorite. She looked so normal, so caring, with her graying hair pulled back and flour smudged on her apron. The woman who'd never missed a parent-teacher conference, who'd driven me to every doctor's appointment, who'd cried when I got my driver's license last month because she was so proud of the young man I'd become. There you are, she smiled, reaching for the heating pad. Thank you, sweetheart. Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes. I managed to nod, to mumble something about homework, before escaping upstairs to my room. Once the door was closed, I pulled out the poster again, studying every detail. The phone number was still active, I'd checked. Detective Morrison had retired, but the case remained open. Someone was still looking for Jamie Collins. Someone had never stopped looking for me. I opened my laptop with trembling fingers. It was time to find out who. The first Google search hit me like a physical blow. Jamie Collins missing child case, family never gives up hope, 10-year anniversary. The article was from the Charleston Gazette-Mail, dated just 2 months ago. There was the same photo from the poster, but this time it was surrounded by others, a man and woman in their 40s, holding hands at a press conference. The woman had my eyes. The man had my stubborn cowlick that never stayed down no matter how much gel I used. David and Sarah Collins continue their search for their son Jamie, who disappeared from Riverside Park 10 years ago during a family picnic. Not a day goes by that we don't think about him, says Sarah Collins, 43. We know he's out there somewhere. We know he's growing up into an amazing young man, and we just want him to know that we never stopped loving him. I had to close the laptop and put my head between my knees to keep from throwing up. They were alive. My real parents were alive and they'd been searching for me this entire time. While Margaret tucked me into bed and told me stories about my dead parents watching over me from heaven, my actual mother and father were putting up flyers and holding press conferences and never giving up hope. The article mentioned a foundation they'd started, the Jamie Collins Foundation for Missing Children. They'd helped find 63 other kids over the past decade. 63 families reunited because mine couldn't be. I scrolled through more search results with shaking hands. There were dozens of articles spanning the years. Age progression photos showing what I might look like at 8, 10, 12, 15. The most recent one, from my 16th birthday last year, was startlingly accurate. Same messy brown hair, same stubborn jaw, same green eyes that Margaret always said came from my father's side. She wasn't wrong about that, apparently. Just not the father she'd made up. A soft knock on my door made me slam the laptop shut. Jamie? You've been awfully quiet up there. Margaret's voice was muffled through the wood. Everything okay? Yeah, just working on that history essay, I called back, proud that my voice sounded almost normal. Well, dinner's ready when you are. Made your favorite cornbread too. Her footsteps retreated down the hallway. The same caring, motherly routine she'd maintained for 11 years. How long had she been planning this when she took me? How had she even managed it? And why me specifically? Was it random, or had she known my family somehow? I reopened the laptop and found a more detailed timeline of my disappearance. September 15, 2014. My family had driven down from their home in Morgantown for a weekend camping trip. We'd stopped at Riverside Park for lunch. I'd been playing on the swings while my parents, my real parents, packed up our picnic. When they looked up, I was gone. The initial search had involved over 200 volunteers, K-9 units, and helicopters. They'd dragged the river. They'd interviewed every registered sex offender in a 50-mile radius. They'd followed up on hundreds of tips and false sightings. But no one had thought to look 150 miles north in Pennsylvania, where a woman named Margaret Morrison had suddenly gained a traumatized 6-year-old nephew whose parents had tragically died in a car accident. Where she'd enrolled him in school under the name Jamie Morrison, with what must have been expertly forged documents. Where she'd built an entire life on a lie so massive it had fooled everyone for over a decade. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Tyler, still on for the game Friday. I stared at the message, reality crashing over me. Tyler didn't know Jamie Collins. Nobody here did. They all knew Jamie Morrison, Margaret's orphan nephew, the quiet kid who was good at math and terrible at sports and had never quite gotten over losing his parents so young. But Jamie Morrison didn't exist. He never had. I spent the next 3 hours going down a rabbit hole that made everything worse. Social media had barely existed when I disappeared, but my parents had embraced it fully in their search efforts. The Jamie Collins Foundation Facebook page had over 40,000 followers. There were photos from candlelight vigils, screenshots of age progression photos being shared thousands of times, videos of my mother pleading directly into the camera. Jamie, if you can see this somehow, we love you. We're never going to stop looking. You have a little sister now, her name is Emma, and she asks about her big brother every single day. A sister. I had a sister. I found Emma's Instagram account easily enough, Emma Collins, 14 years old, living in Morgantown. Her bio read, artist, dog lover, still believing in miracles, red heart. Her profile picture showed a girl with my same stubborn cowlick and Margaret's, no, my mother's, green eyes. She was holding a golden retriever puppy and grinning at the camera. I scrolled through months of posts. Normal teenage stuff mostly, but scattered throughout were photos that made my chest tight. A birthday cake with 17 candles and the caption, happy birthday to the best big brother, wherever you are. A family photo from Christmas morning with a wrapped present under the tree labeled, for Jamie, when you come home. A selfie of her wearing a Batman t-shirt identical to the one I'd been wearing when I disappeared, wearing this for you today, Jamie. Mom says it was your favorite. The comments on her posts were full of heart emojis and promises to keep sharing, keep looking. Her friends all seemed to know about me. Her whole world had been shaped by having a missing brother she'd never met. That's when I found the worst part. A post from 3 weeks ago, a photo of Emma holding an acceptance letter. Got into the summer art program at Carnegie Mellon. Mom cried because she said Jamie always wanted to go there. Maybe he'll see this and know his little sister is following in his footsteps. Carnegie Mellon. I'd been planning to apply there for computer science. I'd never told Margaret it was my dream school, hell, I'd never told anyone. I just felt drawn to it somehow, like it was calling to me. Because it was where I'd always planned to go, back when I was 6 years old and my dad was teaching me basic programming on his old laptop. A memory I'd thought was a dream, because Margaret said I'd never shown interest in computers until middle school. Jamie. Dinner's getting cold. Margaret called from downstairs. I closed the laptop and tried to compose myself. Walking downstairs felt like descending into enemy territory. Margaret had set the table with the good plates, the ones with the tiny blue flowers that she claimed had belonged to her grandmother. How much of her life was real? How much was just another layer of the lie? There you are, she smiled, ladling stew into my bowl. You look pale, honey. Are you feeling all right? Just tired, I managed. She reached across the table and pressed her palm to my forehead, the same gesture she'd done thousands of times over the years. Her hand was warm and familiar, and for a split second I almost forgot what I discovered. This was the woman who taught me to tie my shoes, who'd stayed up all night when I had pneumonia in 4th grade, who'd celebrated every birthday and holiday like I was the most important person in her world. She was also the woman who'd stolen me from my real family and let them suffer for 11 years, thinking their son was dead. Margaret, I said carefully, testing the waters. Do you ever think about what would have happened if my parents hadn't died? If I'd grown up with them instead? Her expression flickered for just a moment, so quickly I almost missed it. Fear, maybe. Or guilt. Oh sweetheart, she said, her voice softening. That's not healthy thinking. Your parents loved you very much, but they're gone. I'm your family now. I've always been your family. Another lie, delivered with perfect maternal concern. I nodded and took a bite of stew, my mind racing. She was good at this, unnaturally good. 11 years of practice had made her a master manipulator. But I was done being manipulated. After dinner, I helped Margaret with the dishes like always, making small talk about my calculus test and her book club meeting next week. Normal conversation that felt surreal after everything I'd learned. When she settled into her recliner to watch Jeopardy, I excused myself to finish homework and went back upstairs. But instead of my room, I slipped into hers. If Margaret had kept my missing person poster all these years, what else was she hiding? I moved carefully through her space, hyper-aware of every creak in the floorboards. The Jeopardy theme song drifted up from downstairs. I had maybe 20 minutes before she'd come check on me. Her dresser drawers revealed nothing unusual. Normal clothes, reading glasses, hand cream. But tucked behind her jewelry box, I found a manila envelope that made my blood run cold. Inside were documents that told the whole story of Jamie Morrison's creation. A forged birth certificate listing Margaret Morrison as my mother and a Robert Morrison as my father. A death certificate for Robert, dated 6 months before my disappearance. Medical records showing a history of childhood trauma requiring therapy, explaining why Jamie Morrison was so quiet and had trouble remembering his early years. But the most damning thing was at the bottom of the stack, a life insurance policy for Robert Morrison. $75,000, with Margaret as the sole beneficiary. Dated 2 weeks after my disappearance. She hadn't just stolen me. She'd created an entire dead husband to explain my existence, then collected insurance money on him. The woman was a criminal mastermind. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the papers when I found the bank statements. Over the past 11 years, Margaret had received over $200,000 in various forms of aid. Foster care payments from the state. Donations from our church congregation for helping raise her traumatized nephew. Disability benefits for my supposed PTSD. Even a $15,000 grant from a local charity that helps single guardians caring for orphan children. She'd built a career out of my kidnapping. Jamie. Margaret's voice came from the bottom of the stairs. Could you come down here for a minute, honey? I shoved everything back into the envelope, my heart hammering. Had she heard me moving around? Did she know what I'd found? Coming. I called, slipping out of her room and into the hallway. She was standing at the foot of the stairs, holding a piece of mail. Her expression was casual, but there was something in her eyes I'd never noticed before. A watchfulness. This came for you today, she said, holding out a thick envelope. Looks like college information. It was from Carnegie Mellon. My dream school that I'd never told her about. How did they get my address? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Oh, you know how these schools are. They buy mailing lists, send information to anyone with good grades. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Though I'm not sure why you'd be interested in Pennsylvania. It's so far away. And expensive. There was something in her tone, a subtle warning. She'd kept me isolated here for 11 years, probably for exactly this reason. The fear that I'd want to leave, to explore, to potentially stumble across the truth. Yeah, you're right, I said, taking the envelope. I'll probably just stick to local schools. Relief flickered across her face. That's my practical boy. Besides, why would you want to leave? We're happy here, aren't we? Just the two of us against the world. The same phrase she'd used my whole life. Our little family motto. But now it sounded sinister, like a threat disguised as affection. I nodded and headed back upstairs, clutching the Carnegie Mellon packet. Once in my room, I opened it with trembling fingers. Standard recruitment materials, but there was a handwritten note from an admissions counselor. Jamie, your preliminary application showed real promise. We'd love to arrange a campus visit. Preliminary application. I'd never submitted anything to Carnegie Mellon. Unless 6-year-old Jamie Collins had talked about it enough that someone remembered. I stared at the note until the words blurred together. A preliminary application I'd never submitted. Someone out there knew exactly who I was and where to find me. The realization hit like ice water. I wasn't the first person to figure this out. My laptop was still warm when I opened it, muscle memory carrying me through a search I should have done hours ago. Margaret Morrison, Pennsylvania, brought up results that made my stomach clench. The Scranton Times-Tribune, March 3, 2019, local woman questioned in missing child case. The article was brief, buried on page 6. Margaret Morrison of Millfield had been questioned in connection with the disappearance of 7-year-old Michael Chen from a mall in Harrisburg. She'd been released without charges due to insufficient evidence, but the timing was suspicious, exactly 5 years after my disappearance. I kept digging. The Morning Call, August 15, 2016, false alarm in missing child case. A tip had led police to investigate Margaret Morrison regarding a missing girl from Allentown. Again, nothing concrete enough to stick. She'd been on their radar for years. My phone buzzed with a text, making me jump. Unknown number, is this Jamie Collins? I stared at the screen, my heart hammering. Nobody had this number except people who knew me as Jamie Morrison. I'd had the same cell number since freshman year. Another message, asterisk, I know this is scary. My name is Detective Sarah Winters, West Virginia State Police. I've been working your case with your parents, asterisk. A third message, this one containing a photo, Detective Winters' badge, held next to today's newspaper. Asterisk, we've been watching Margaret Morrison for 2 years. We know who you are, asterisk. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely type. How did you get this number? Asterisk, Carnegie Mellon admissions office flagged unusual activity on your file last month. Someone had been accessing records for Jamie Collins going back years, using administrator credentials. We traced it back to Margaret Morrison. She's been monitoring college databases, probably looking for any sign you might discover your real identity, asterisk. The room spun. Margaret hadn't just been reactive, she'd been actively hunting down threats to her lie. How many close calls had there been over the years? How many times had she steered me away from situations or places that might expose the truth? Are you safe right now? Detective Winters texted. I looked toward my bedroom door. Margaret's footsteps were moving around downstairs, the familiar evening routine of locking doors and turning off lights. In 20 minutes, she'd come upstairs to say goodnight, like she had every single night for 11 years. Asterisk, I think so. For now, asterisk. Asterisk, good. Don't change your routine. We're close to making an arrest, but we need more evidence. The documents you found today, can you photograph them? Asterisk. My blood went cold. How do you know what I found? Asterisk, your internet searches triggered monitoring software we installed on her network 6 months ago. We know you found the poster, the forged documents, the bank statements. Jamie, you've been incredibly brave, but you're not alone anymore, asterisk. I sank onto my bed, overwhelmed. The police had been watching us for months. They knew everything I just discovered, had probably known it long before I'd stumbled across that poster. Why didn't you just arrest her? I typed. Asterisk, we needed ironclad evidence. Margaret Morrison is smart, she's evaded charges twice before. Your testimony as the victim, combined with the physical evidence you can help us secure, will put her away for decades, asterisk. Before I could respond, I heard Margaret's footsteps on the stairs. I quickly deleted the message thread and shoved my phone under my pillow just as her familiar knock came at the door. Jamie? I'm heading to bed, sweetheart. Okay, I called back, my voice barely steady. Good night. But instead of leaving, the doorknob turned. Margaret stepped inside, something she rarely did without permission. She was wearing her old blue robe, her hair in curlers, looking exactly like the caring guardian she'd always appeared to be. You seem troubled tonight, she said, settling on the edge of my bed. Want to talk about what's bothering you? I forced myself to meet her eyes. The same warm brown eyes that had comforted me through nightmares, that had sparkled with pride at every achievement, that had looked at me with such convincing love for over a decade. Just stressed about college applications, I lied. Wondering if I'm making the right choices. She reached over and smoothed my hair back from my forehead, a gesture that had once felt maternal but now made my skin crawl. You know what I think, she said softly. I think someone's been filling your head with ideas about leaving home. About exploring big, scary places where you don't belong. Her hand was still in my hair, but her grip had tightened slightly. Maybe it's time we had a real conversation about your future, Jamie. About what's best for our family. The way she said, our family, sent chills down my spine. The conversation with Margaret felt like walking through a minefield. Every word I spoke could be the one that revealed I knew the truth. She stayed perched on my bed for another 10 minutes, asking seemingly innocent questions about my day, my friends, my plans for the weekend. But there was something different in her tone, a probing quality that made me wonder if she suspected something. You know, Jamie, she said finally, I've been thinking we should take a little vacation. Just the two of us. Maybe drive down south, see some new places. Get away from all these college recruiters bothering you. My blood ran cold. A vacation right now? When Detective Winters had said they were close to making an arrest. That sounds nice, I managed, but I have that calculus test next week, and... Tests can be made up, she interrupted, her smile not wavering. Family time is more important. I was thinking we could leave this weekend. Pack light, make it an adventure. She was planning to run. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Somehow, she knew the walls were closing in, and she was preparing to disappear again. Probably with another new identity already prepared, another tragic backstory to explain why Jamie Morrison had suddenly needed to relocate. How many times had she done this before? I should let you get some sleep, Margaret said, finally standing. But instead of heading toward the door, she walked to my dresser, casually straightening items that didn't need straightening. Her movements seemed random until I realized she was positioning herself to see my laptop screen. Good night, sweetheart, she said, kissing the top of my head. Sweet dreams. The moment her footsteps faded down the hallway, I grabbed my phone from under the pillow. My hands were shaking as I texted Detective Winters, * she wants to take me on a vacation this weekend. I think she knows something, *. The response came within seconds, * we're moving up our timeline. Can you get photos of those documents tonight, *. She's suspicious. What if she catches me, *. Jamie, I need you to listen carefully. We have units positioned around your house, but we can't move without solid evidence. Those forged documents are the smoking gun we need. Can you do this, *. I stared at the message, terror and determination warring in my chest. After 11 years of lies, I was finally close to the truth. But the woman downstairs wasn't just Margaret anymore, she was a predator who'd stolen children before, who'd evaded capture multiple times, who was smart enough to stay ahead of the police for over a decade. And she was planning to run with me in tow. How do I know you're really the police? I texted back, suddenly paranoid. What if this is some kind of trap? A new message appeared, this one containing a photo that made my breath catch. It showed my real parents, David and Sarah Collins, standing outside what looked like a police station. They were older than in the newspaper photos, worn down by years of searching, but unmistakably the people from my recovered memories. Sarah was holding a sign that read, "We love you, Jamie," with today's date written at the bottom. * They're here, Jamie. They drove down from West Virginia the moment we told them we'd found you. They've been waiting in the station for hours, hoping to see you soon, *. I pressed my hand to my mouth to stifle a sob. My real parents were less than 20 miles away, probably closer than they'd been to me in 11 years. After all this time, all their searching and hoping and never giving up, I was finally within reach. I'll get the documents, I typed. * Be careful. If she catches you, just play dumb. Say you were looking for something else. We'll figure out another way, *. I waited until I heard Margaret's bedroom door close, then counted off another 30 minutes to be safe. The old house settled around me with familiar creaks and sighs, sounds that had once been comforting but now felt ominous. Every noise could be Margaret discovering what I was up to. Moving like a ghost, I crept back to her room. The manila envelope was exactly where I'd left it, hidden behind her jewelry box. My phone's camera seemed impossibly loud as I photographed each document, the flash lighting up Margaret's sleeping form in the bed just feet away. She stirred when I was halfway through the stack, mumbling something in her sleep, and I froze completely until her breathing evened out again. The forged birth certificate. The fake death certificate for the husband who'd never existed. The insurance policy she'd collected on a dead man. Bank statements showing years of fraud. Evidence of a crime that had stolen my childhood and destroyed my family. The last document in the stack was something I hadn't seen before, a handwritten letter addressed to my dearest sister. The handwriting was Margaret's, but the content made no sense until I read the signature, "Love always, Margaret Morrison, formerly Margaret Collins." Collins. Margaret Collins. My hands started shaking so violently I nearly dropped the phone. Margaret wasn't just some random kidnapper who'd stolen me from a park. She was family, my father's sister, just like she always claimed. But she'd stolen me from her own brother, let him and his wife suffer for 11 years thinking their son was dead, while she played the role of grieving aunt caring for a tragic orphan. The betrayal was so complete, so monstrous, that I had to grip the dresser to keep from collapsing. Got everything, I texted Detective Winters once I was safely back in my room. But there's something else. She really is my aunt. My father's sister, we know. That's how she had access to your family information, how she knew enough to forge convincing documents. It's also how she's managed to stay ahead of us for so long, she knows how your parents think, how they search, what they're likely to do next, *. The full scope of Margaret's betrayal hit me like a tsunami. She hadn't just stolen a random child, she'd stolen her own nephew from her own brother, then sat back and watched her family's anguish while collecting sympathy and money for her supposed sacrifice. What happens now? I typed. Now you try to get some sleep. Tomorrow morning, we end this, *. I barely slept that night, jumping at every sound the old house made. When my alarm went off at 6:30 a.m., I felt like I'd been awake for days. Margaret was already in the kitchen when I came downstairs, humming while she scrambled eggs, the picture of domestic normalcy. "Good morning, sunshine," she said brightly. "I made your favorite breakfast. We need to talk about our vacation plans." She set a plate in front of me, eggs perfectly fluffy, bacon crispy, toast cut diagonally the way I'd liked since I was small. The same breakfast she'd made me on the first day of school every year. How many of those memories were tainted now? "I called the school," she continued, settling across from me with her coffee. "Told them you'd be out sick today. We have a lot to do before our trip." "What kind of things?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual while my stomach churned. "Oh, you know. Banking errands, picking up some travel supplies." She smiled, but her eyes were sharp. "I thought we'd drive down to Virginia first." I have some old friends there who'd love to meet you. Virginia. Right next to West Virginia, where my real parents were probably still waiting at the police station. Was that intentional? Was she planning to taunt them somehow, or was it just coincidence? Margaret, I said carefully, can I ask you something? Of course, sweetheart. Anything. Do you ever miss our family? Like, Dad's side of the family? You never really talk about them. For just a moment, her composure cracked. Something flickered across her face, guilt, maybe, or fear. But it was gone so quickly I almost missed it. Oh, honey, she said softly. That's ancient history. Your father, well, he wasn't a good man, Jamie. Neither was his family. That's why I don't talk about them. Some stones are better left unturned. Another lie, delivered with perfect conviction. My real father had spent 11 years searching for me, had started a foundation that helped find dozens of other missing children, had never given up hope. But in Margaret's version of reality, he was the villain. My phone buzzed with a text. Margaret's eyes immediately snapped to it, watching as I checked the message. It was from Tyler, dude, heard you're sick. Want me to bring homework by later, ? Just Tyler, I said, showing her the screen. He offered to bring my homework. That's sweet of him, but we won't be here, Margaret said. Tell him you're going out of town for a family emergency. I typed back a response, but while I was doing it, I quickly opened my camera roll to make sure the photos from last night were still there. They were 17 images of forged documents and bank statements that would put Margaret away for decades. Ready to get going? Margaret asked, already standing. I want to get an early start. Where exactly are we going first? The bank. I need to close out some accounts, make sure we have enough cash for the trip. She was moving around the kitchen with purpose now, packing snacks into a cooler. Then we'll swing by the storage unit to pick up some things. Storage unit? In 11 years of living here, Margaret had never mentioned a storage unit. What kind of things? I asked. Just some old family documents. Birth certificates, that sort of thing. You know how travel is these days, they're so picky about identification. My blood turned to ice. She wasn't just planning to run, she was planning to change our identities again. The storage unit probably contained forged documents for whoever we were going to become next. I should probably shower first, I said, standing up from the table. Make it quick, Margaret replied. I want to be on the road by noon. Upstairs, I turned on the shower but immediately grabbed my phone instead. She's making me skip school. Wants to leave by noon. Says we're going to the bank and a storage unit first, . Detective Winters responded instantly, storage unit address. I crept back downstairs, staying on the carpeted sections to avoid creaks. Margaret was in the kitchen, her back to me, talking quietly on her phone. I could only catch fragments, earlier than planned. And, have everything ready. She was coordinating with someone else. I slipped back upstairs and into the shower, mind racing. How many people were involved in this? Was Margaret part of some larger network of child traffickers? The thought made me physically sick. When I came back downstairs 20 minutes later, Margaret was waiting by the front door with 2 packed suitcases, one I recognized as mine, though I'd never packed it. Ready? She asked brightly. I nodded, pocketing my phone. As we walked to her car, I noticed a black sedan parked at the end of our street that hadn't been there yesterday. Detective Winters had said they had units positioned around the house. I hoped they were ready to follow us to wherever Margaret was planning to go. Margaret hummed along to the radio as we drove, acting like this was just another normal day. But I noticed she kept checking her mirrors, and she took several turns that didn't make sense if we were really just going to the bank. Margaret, I said as we pulled into the parking lot of First National, I love you. It wasn't entirely a lie. Despite everything, some part of me still loved the woman who'd raised me, even though I now knew it was all built on the worst kind of deception. She reached over and squeezed my hand. I love you too, Jamie. More than you'll ever know. That's why I'm doing all of this, to protect you. As we walked toward the bank entrance, I saw the black sedan pull into the parking lot behind us. It was almost over. The bank lobby felt like a movie set, too bright, too normal, with Margaret playing her role of concerned guardian perfectly while I tried not to look at the security cameras I hoped were recording everything. She guided me to a chair near the customer service desk with a gentle hand on my shoulder, the same protective gesture she'd used my entire life. I'll just be a few minutes, sweetheart, she said, loud enough for nearby customers to hear. Just some boring paperwork for your college fund. College fund. Even now, she was maintaining the fiction. Margaret approached the teller window with a canvas bag and a stack of forms. I couldn't hear the conversation, but I watched her slide an ID across the counter, not her usual driver's license, but something else. The teller examined it carefully, then began typing on her computer. My phone buzzed silently in my pocket. A text from Detective Winters, * we're in position. Bank manager has been briefed. Whatever happens, stay close to Margaret until we give the signal, *. I watched Margaret through the bulletproof glass as she signed document after document. The teller disappeared into the back room, returning with several thick envelopes that went straight into Margaret's bag. Cash withdrawals. Lots of them. When she rejoined me, the bag looked heavy. All set, she said cheerfully. Next stop, the storage facility. But instead of heading to our car, she steered me toward the bank side exit, the one that led to the employee parking garage. My stomach dropped. Wrong way, I said, trying to sound casual. Our car's out front. Actually, honey, I moved it while you weren't looking. The attendant said we couldn't park in the customer spots for more than 30 minutes. Another lie. I'd been watching the front entrance the entire time we'd been inside. Our car hadn't moved. The side door opened into a dimly lit parking garage that smelled like exhaust and old concrete. Margaret's grip on my arm tightened as she led me between rows of parked cars, her heels clicking on the cement floor. Margaret, where are we going? Just trust me, Jamie. Everything I do is to protect you. We stopped beside a white van with tinted windows, definitely not Margaret's blue Honda Civic. A man emerged from the driver's seat, someone I'd never seen before. He was tall, maybe 40, with graying hair and kind eyes that reminded me disturbingly of my real father. "This is Uncle Robert," Margaret said smoothly. "He's going to help us with our trip." Uncle Robert. The fictional dead husband from the forged documents was real, or at least, someone was playing him. How long had this been planned? "Nice to finally meet you, Jamie," Robert said, extending his hand for a shake. His voice was warm, practiced, like he'd rehearsed this moment. "Your aunts told me so much about you over the years." Over the years. This wasn't a recent development, they'd been in contact long enough for him to feel familiar with my life story. "Get in the van, sweetheart," Margaret said, sliding open the side door. "Robert's going to drive us to our first stop." The van's interior had been modified. The back seats had been removed, replaced with a small table, some blankets, and a cooler. Like a camping setup, or a mobile living space. This wasn't just about running away for a weekend, they'd been preparing for a permanent disappearance. "I don't understand," I said, backing away from the van. "What about our car? What about going home to get more clothes?" "We have everything we need," Margaret said, her voice firm now. "Jamie, I need you to trust me. There are some very bad people who want to hurt our family. People who've been asking questions, making threats. This is the only way to keep you safe." "The police." She was talking about the police investigation. "What kind of people?" I asked, still not moving toward the van. Robert stepped closer, and I noticed he was positioning himself to block my path back to the bank entrance. "The kind who like to break up happy families," he said. "Who think they know what's best for children better than the people who actually love them." "Jamie." Margaret's voice had an edge now, the warmth finally cracking. "Get in the van. Now." "What if I don't want to?" The question hung in the air between us. For the first time in 11 years, I directly challenged Margaret's authority. Her face cycled through several expressions, surprise, hurt, anger, before settling on something cold and calculating. "Then you'll force me to make choices I don't want to make," she said quietly. "And trust me, sweetheart, you don't want that." Robert's hand moved to his jacket pocket. The message was clear. I looked around the parking garage, hoping to spot Detective Winters or the backup units, but saw only empty cars and shadows. Had they lost track of us when we exited through the side door? My phone felt heavy in my pocket, but I couldn't risk reaching for it with both Margaret and Robert watching me so intently. "Okay," I said finally, stepping toward the van. "But can you at least explain what's happening?" "I'm scared." Margaret's expression softened immediately, the maternal mask sliding back into place. "Of course you're scared, baby. But I promise, once we get where we're going, everything will make sense. I'll explain everything." As I climbed into the van, I caught a glimpse of movement near the garage entrance. A figure in a dark jacket, staying in the shadows between parked cars. Maybe the police hadn't lost us after all. The van's engine rumbled to life as Robert pulled out of the parking garage, and I watched the bank disappear behind us through the tinted rear window. Margaret had positioned herself in the middle seat, close enough to grab me if I tried anything stupid, but far enough away to maintain the illusion that this was all voluntary. "Where exactly are we going?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Somewhere safe," Margaret replied, checking her phone. "Robert has a cabin in the mountains. Very private, very peaceful. We can stay there as long as we need to. As long as we need to. That could mean weeks, months, or forever." I watched the streets pass by, memorizing turns and landmarks in case I got a chance to call for help. We were heading west, toward the state forest that stretched for hundreds of miles. If they got me out there, no one would ever find us. "I've been thinking about our conversation last night," Margaret said suddenly. "About college, about your future. I realized I haven't been entirely honest with you about some things." My heart hammered against my ribs. Was she actually going to tell me the truth? "The thing is, Jamie, there are people who want to take you away from me. They think they know better, think they can give you a better life. But they don't understand what we have together." "What people?" "Police officers. Social workers. Even some folks claiming to be your relatives." Her voice was getting tighter with each word. "They've been filling your head with lies, probably through that college mail, maybe even through your friends at school." I forced myself to look confused. "I don't understand." "What lies?" "They're telling people that I'm not really your aunt. That I somehow stole you from another family." Margaret laughed, but it sounded hollow. "Can you imagine anything so ridiculous? After everything we've been through together." Robert's eyes met mine in the rearview mirror. "It's a common scam," he said. "Criminals pose as grieving parents to collect reward money. They prey on loving families like yours." The casual way he delivered that lie made my skin crawl. How many times had they done this? How many other nephews had there been? But why would anyone think that? I pressed. "Don't we have documents proving we're family?" "Of course we do," Margaret said quickly. "But sometimes documents can be questioned by people who don't want to believe the truth. That's why we need to stay away from all this drama until it blows over." My phone buzzed in my pocket. I tensed, hoping they hadn't heard it over the engine noise. Margaret was staring out the window, but Robert's eyes flicked to the mirror again. "Everything okay back there, son?" Son. The word made me want to throw up. "Yeah, this is all really scary. I've never had to hide from anyone before." "I know it's frightening," Margaret said, reaching over to pat my knee. "But I've been protecting you your whole life, haven't I? Remember when you had nightmares as a little boy? I always kept you safe. Nightmares about parents I supposedly couldn't remember because they died when I was too young. Nightmares that were probably actually memories of my real family, trying to surface through whatever trauma Margaret had inflicted to keep me compliant." "Margaret," I said carefully, "can I ask you something that might sound weird?" "Of course, sweetheart. Do you ever feel like maybe I remember things differently than they actually happened? Like sometimes I have these dreams about people who seem familiar, but you've told me they're not real." Her hand stilled on my knee. In the front seat, Robert's shoulders tensed. Trauma can do strange things to memory, she said after a long pause. Especially childhood trauma. Sometimes our minds create false memories to fill in gaps, or to make sense of things that were too painful to remember correctly. But what if they're not false? What if? Jamie. Her voice was sharp now, cutting off my question. Those dreams aren't real. The people in them aren't real. I'm the only family you have, and I'm the only person who's ever truly loved you. Do you understand me? The threat in her tone was unmistakable. But for the first time in my life, instead of making me want to please her, it made me angry. Yes, ma'am, I said quietly. My phone buzzed again, twice in quick succession. Emergency alerts, maybe, or Detective Winters trying to reach me. I shifted position slightly, pretending to adjust my seatbelt, and managed to glance at the screen. 3 missed calls from an unknown number. 2 text messages. Asterisk Jamie, this is your father. The police told us everything. We're coming for you, asterisk. Asterisk we love you. We never stopped looking. Hold on, asterisk. My real father. David Collins. The man I'd seen in all those newspaper articles, who'd started a foundation in my name, who'd never given up hope even after 11 years. He was coming for me. I looked up to find Margaret watching me intently. Who was texting you? She asked. Tyler. He wanted to know if I'm feeling better. She held out her hand. Let me see. The moment Margaret asked to see my phone, I knew I was caught. Her hand remained extended between us, waiting, while Robert's eyes watched me in the rearview mirror. The van felt smaller suddenly, like the walls were closing in. It's just Tyler being annoying, I said, not moving to hand over the device. You know how he gets. Jamie. Her voice was deadly quiet. Give me the phone. I had maybe 3 seconds to make a choice that would determine everything. Comply and lose my only connection to the outside world, or resist and confirm her suspicions that I knew the truth. I chose resistance. No. The single word hung in the air like a gunshot. Margaret's face went through a series of rapid transformations, shock, hurt, then something cold and predatory that I'd never seen before. Robert, she said without taking her eyes off me. Pull over. We were on Route 219 now, heading into the mountains. Dense forest stretched on both sides of the road, with maybe one car passing every few minutes. Not exactly ideal for a rescue operation. Robert guided the van onto a scenic overlook that was completely deserted. The moment we stopped, Margaret lunged for my phone. I twisted away, but the van's cramped interior didn't give me much room to maneuver. Help me, she snapped at Robert, who had already climbed into the back. Between the two of them, they wrestled the phone away from me within seconds. I'd managed to hit the emergency call button, but Robert ended it before it could connect. Margaret scrolled through my messages, her face growing paler with each one she read. When she reached the photos I'd taken of her documents, she went completely still. How long have you known? She asked quietly. There was no point in lying anymore. Since yesterday. I found the missing person poster in your closet. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, like she was centering herself for what came next. Robert, check his pockets. Phone charger, wallet, anything else. Robert's hands were thorough and impersonal as he searched me. He found my wallet, my student ID, the Carnegie Mellon brochure I'd forgotten about, and a pen. Everything went into a plastic bag. Margaret, I said, you're my aunt. My real aunt. You stole me from your own brother. Her eyes snapped open. I saved you from your brother. David was always the golden child, always got everything he wanted. Perfect grades, perfect wife, perfect life. And when he had you, everyone acted like you were the most amazing thing that had ever happened. The bitterness in her voice was startling. This wasn't about money or mental illness, it was about jealousy. Do you know what it's like, she continued, to watch everyone fawn over your brother's child while you can't even get pregnant yourself? To see him take for granted something you'd give anything to have. So you took me. I gave you a better life. The mask was completely gone now, replaced by raw emotion. David would have raised you to be just like him, entitled, privileged, thinking the world owed you everything. I raised you to be humble, grateful, kind. You raised me on lies. I raised you with love. She was almost shouting now. Every bedtime story, every birthday party, every moment of the last 11 years, that was real love, Jamie. More love than David ever showed you. Robert was watching this exchange with interest, like he'd seen similar breakdowns before. How many other Margaret Morrisons had he helped over the years? The insurance money, I said. The foster care payments. The donations from church. You made a career out of kidnapping me. She slapped me. Hard. The sound echoed in the van's interior, and my cheek burned where her hand had connected. Don't you dare, she whispered. Don't you dare reduce what we have to money. But I'd seen the bank statements. Over $200,000 in 11 years, all because people felt sorry for the woman raising her traumatized nephew. What happens now? I asked. Margaret and Robert exchanged a look. Some kind of silent communication passed between them. Now we disappear, she said finally. Properly this time. New names, new state, new everything. And if I refuse? Then you'll learn that love isn't always gentle, Robert said softly. Sometimes it requires difficult choices. Through the van's windshield, I could see another vehicle pulling into the overlook behind us. A black sedan with tinted windows. Detective Winters had found us. The black sedan's doors opened simultaneously, and I watched Detective Winters emerge from the passenger side while her partner took the driver's position. Both had their hands near their weapons but weren't drawing them yet. Through the van's rear window, I could see Winters speaking into a radio clip to her shoulder. Company, Robert said quietly, checking his side mirror. Margaret's head whipped around to look, and I saw something flicker across her face, not surprise, but resignation. Like she'd been expecting this moment for a long time. How many times have you done this? I asked, the question spilling out before I could stop myself. How many other kids? You were the only one, Margaret said, but her voice lacked conviction. You were special. You were supposed to be mine. Robert snorted. Tell him about the girl in Allentown, Maggie. Tell him about the boy in Harrisburg. Shut up, Margaret snapped, but the damage was done. The newspaper articles I'd found weren't isolated incidents, they were part of a pattern spanning years. Detective Winters was walking toward us now, her partner flanking to the left. Her phone was pressed to her ear, probably coordinating with additional backup units. The overlook that had seemed dangerously isolated moments ago now felt like a trap closing in. Margaret Morrison, Detective Winters called out, her voice carrying clearly in the mountain air. Step out of the vehicle with your hands visible. Instead of complying, Margaret reached across me and pulled down a fold-out panel I hadn't noticed before. Hidden behind it was a small arsenal, 2 handguns, zip ties, duct tape, and what looked like syringes filled with clear liquid. Insurance policy, she explained, selecting one of the guns with practiced ease. Robert believed in being prepared for contingencies. My blood went cold. This wasn't just about running away anymore, they'd been ready for a confrontation with law enforcement from the beginning. How many escape plans had they rehearsed over the years? Margaret, I said carefully, those are police officers. Real police officers. If you hurt them. If I hurt them, we might actually make it to Canada, she finished. Robert has contacts there. People who understand that sometimes loving families need to disappear from an unjust system. Through the windshield, I could see Detective Winters drawing her weapon now. Her partner was speaking rapidly into his radio, probably calling for additional units and maybe a negotiator. Last chance, Margaret, Detective Winters called. Let Jamie go, and we can talk about this. Margaret looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, desperate, calculating, and utterly foreign from the woman who'd raised me. Do you know what prison is like for people like me? For people who hurt children? You didn't hurt me, I said automatically, though even as the words left my mouth, I wasn't sure they were true. 11 years of lies, of stolen identity, of psychological manipulation, wasn't that its own kind of abuse? The system won't see it that way. She checked the gun's clip with movements that suggested familiarity with firearms. They'll paint me as a monster, a predator. They won't understand that everything I did was out of love. Robert had started the engine again. We can punch through their roadblock if we move fast enough. They're not expecting us to. Nobody's punching through anything, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. Margaret, I know you love me. I believe that part was real. But this isn't love anymore. This is kidnapping, and it's wrong. She turned to stare at me, the gun hanging loose in her grip. After everything I've given you, everything I've sacrificed. My real parents sacrificed too. They spent 11 years searching for me. They started a foundation that helped find 63 other missing kids. They never gave up hope. They gave up on me, Margaret whispered, and suddenly she looked fragile, broken. When I couldn't have children, when my marriage fell apart, when I needed help, David was too busy with his perfect life to care about his sister. For the first time, I caught a glimpse of the pain that had driven her to such desperate measures. Margaret Morrison hadn't just been a calculating predator, she'd been a deeply wounded person who'd made increasingly terrible choices to fill the emptiness in her life. But understanding her motivation didn't change what she'd done to me, or to my real family, or to the other children she'd apparently targeted over the years. It's over, I said gently. Let me go home. Margaret stared at me for what felt like an eternity, the gun trembling in her grip. Through the windshield, I could see Detective Winters gesturing to her partner, probably coordinating their next move. More vehicles were pulling into the overlook now. I counted at least 3 additional cars, their red and blue lights painting the forest in alternating colors. Home, Margaret repeated, the word bitter on her tongue. You think those people are your home? You think David and Sarah Collins know anything about who you really are? They're my parents, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. They've been looking for me for 11 years. They've been looking for a 6-year-old who doesn't exist anymore. Her grip tightened on the weapon. You're 17 now, Jamie. You're the person I made you. Your sense of humor, your kindness, your values, that all came from me. Robert was watching the police through his side mirror, his hand still on the steering wheel. Maggie, we need to move. They're setting up a perimeter. But Margaret seemed oblivious to everything except our conversation. Do you remember your first day of school? 2nd grade, because we had to wait a year for your documents to be processed. You were so scared, but I bought you that Batman backpack and promised I'd be there when you got home. I did remember that day. The backpack, the lunch she'd packed with a note that said, have a super day, my superhero, the way she'd waited on the porch when the bus dropped me off. It had felt like love then. It still felt like love, even knowing the truth. I remember, I said quietly. What about when you broke your arm falling off your bike? I stayed in the hospital with you all night, sleeping in that horrible chair because you were afraid the doctors might take you away if I left. More memories flooded back, Margaret reading to me while my arm healed, bringing me ice cream every day for a week, letting me pick all the TV shows even though she hated cartoons. She'd been genuinely caring, genuinely devoted. The tragedy was that it had all been built on a crime that destroyed other people's lives. That was real, I admitted. But so is the family you stole me from. So is my sister Emma, who's been missing her big brother for 11 years. So are all those other families your foundation helped reunite while mine stayed broken. Margaret flinched like I'd hit her. Don't you understand? I gave you stability, consistency, unconditional love. David and Sarah Collins are strangers to you now. Then let me get to know them again, I said. If you really love me, let me make that choice. Through the rear window, I could see Detective Winters speaking into a megaphone now, though I couldn't make out her words over the van's running engine. More backup had arrived, I counted at least 6 vehicles now, including what looked like a SWAT van. Margaret noticed my distraction and followed my gaze. Her face went pale when she saw the scope of the response. Robert, she said urgently, we need to leave. Now. But Robert was staring at something in his side mirror, his face grim. Can't. They've got spike strips across the exit. We're boxed in. For the first time since this nightmare began, Margaret looked truly frightened. The gun in her hand was shaking visibly now, and I could see sweat beading on her forehead despite the cool mountain air. There has to be another way out, she said desperately. The hiking trails, maybe. We could go on foot through the forest. With half the state police looking for us. Robert shook his head. Face it, Maggie. It's over. Margaret's breathing was becoming rapid and shallow. The careful composure she'd maintained for 11 years was finally cracking completely, and I wasn't sure what she might do when it shattered entirely. Margaret, I said as gently as I could manage, please put the gun down. Let's just walk out there together and end this peacefully. She looked at me with eyes that seemed to see a different person entirely, maybe the 6-year-old she'd taken from that park, maybe the son she'd always wanted, maybe someone who existed only in her fractured imagination. I can't go to prison, Jamie. I can't lose you. You're not going to lose me, I lied. We'll figure this out. But we both knew there was no figuring this out. Margaret Morrison was going to prison for kidnapping, fraud, and probably a dozen other charges. Our life together was over, had been over the moment I found that poster in her closet. The only question now was whether it would end peacefully or violently. The megaphone crackled to life again, and this time I could hear Detective Winters clearly. Margaret, we have your storage unit surrounded. Unit 247 at Mountain View Storage. We found the other identities, the cash reserves, the fake documents going back 15 years. Margaret's face went ashen. That's impossible. Nobody knew about. Your phone records, Robert said bitterly, finally turning off the engine. I told you not to call from your personal cell. But you had to check on the arrangements, had to micromanage everything like always. You're blaming me. Margaret's voice pitched higher. After everything I've done for you, all the money I've shared. Shared? Robert laughed harshly. Lady, you paid me to forge documents and provide transportation. This isn't some romantic partnership. This is a business arrangement, and the business just went belly up. I watched this exchange with growing horror. Whatever relationship these two had, it was transactional. Margaret wasn't just a kidnapper, she was part of a larger operation. How many other kids? I asked again, but this time I was looking at Robert. He met my eyes in the rearview mirror with something that might have been regret. Depends what you mean by other kids. Margaret here specialized in long-term acquisitions. One child, raised as family, maximum emotional investment from the community. Clean, sustainable, harder to detect than the usual grab-and-run operations. But there were others, I pressed. 3 attempts before you, Robert admitted, ignoring Margaret's sharp intake of breath. 2 failed extractions, 1 successful placement that lasted 6 months before the heat got too intense. My stomach lurched. What happened to them? Different handlers, different outcomes. Not my department. Margaret was staring at Robert like she'd never seen him before. You said I was special. You said what we had was. What we had was profitable, Robert cut her off. 11 years of steady income from 1 placement. That's a record in this business, Maggie. You should be proud. The casual way he discussed stolen children like commodities made me want to throw up. But it also gave me crucial information that Detective Winters needed to hear. Through the windshield, I could see officers positioning themselves behind their vehicles. One was setting up what looked like recording equipment, probably trying to capture whatever conversation was happening in the van. Margaret, I said, raising my voice slightly in hopes the police microphones might pick it up. Robert just admitted there were other children. 3 attempts before me. You're part of a network that steals kids. She whirled on me, the gun swinging in my direction. That's not what this is. You weren't stolen, you were rescued from a family that didn't deserve you. A 6-month placement that got too hot, I continued, still speaking loudly. Robert, what happened to that child when the heat got too intense? Robert's jaw tightened. Kid, you really don't want to know. But I did want to know, and more importantly, I wanted the police to know. Was the child returned to their family? The silence that followed was answer enough. Margaret was breathing in short, panicked gasps now. Robert, he's trying to make this sound worse than it is. Tell him about the good homes, tell him about the families who. There were no good homes, Robert said flatly. There was money changing hands and kids disappearing into a system designed to erase their past identities. You convinced yourself this was about love and family, but it was always about the money, Maggie. Always. The megaphone crackled again. We're prepared to discuss terms, but we need to see Jamie first. Send him out, and we can talk. Margaret looked at me, then at the gun in her hand, then at the police surrounding us. I could practically see her mind racing through options that were rapidly dwindling to zero. There's still the trail, she whispered. The hiking trail behind the overlook. We could make it to the state forest, find somewhere to hide until. Until what? I asked. Until you find another Robert to forge new documents. Until you steal another child to replace me when I get too old. Her face crumpled. You were never supposed to get too old. You were supposed to stay my little boy forever. The weight of Margaret's words hit me like a physical blow. You were supposed to stay my little boy forever. The desperate, childlike quality in her voice made everything click into place, the isolated location, the homeschooling until 8th grade, the way she'd always seemed slightly panicked whenever I showed signs of growing independence. The other kids, I said slowly, the horrible realization forming. The ones who got too old. That's why their placements failed, isn't it? Robert's expression in the rearview mirror confirmed what I was thinking. Adolescence is problematic for long-term emotional manipulation. Kids start asking questions, wanting freedom, developing their own identities separate from their handlers. Stop calling me a handler. Margaret screamed, the gun waving wildly. I'm his aunt. I raised him. I loved him. You're a predator who got lucky once, Robert said coldly. 11 years is an anomaly, not a success story. Most placements don't make it past age 12. Detective Winters' voice came through the megaphone again. Margaret, we've been in contact with the Collins family. They're here, waiting to see their son. Sarah has a message for Jamie. Margaret's grip tightened on the weapon. Don't listen. They're trying to manipulate you. But Detective Winters continued, she says to tell you that Emma kept your room exactly the way it was. She says your favorite stuffed animal, Mr. Bear, is still on your bed waiting for you. My breath caught. I hadn't thought about Mr. Bear in years, but suddenly I could see him clearly, a brown teddy bear with one missing eye that I carried everywhere when I was little. Margaret had told me he'd been lost in a fire that supposedly killed my parents. She says to tell you about the apple tree, Detective Winter's voice continued. The one your father planted in the backyard the day you were born. Emma carved both your names in the trunk last year because she wanted you to know she was thinking about you. Margaret was shaking her head violently. Lies. They're coached responses based on research. They don't really remember. The camping trips, the megaphone crackled. Every summer at Seneca Rocks. Your father taught you to tie a bowline knot when you were 5. You insisted on practicing it every night before bed. My hands moved automatically, fingers forming the familiar loop. I could tie a bowline knot in my sleep, muscle memory so deep I'd never questioned where it came from. Margaret had always said I was naturally good with my hands. Your mother says she still makes chocolate chip pancakes every year on your birthday, September 3rd, because they were your favorite. September 3rd. My real birthday. Margaret had always celebrated my birthday on November 15th, claiming that was when my new life with her had begun after my parents' death. Stop, Margaret whispered, pressing her free hand to her ear. Stop, stop, stop. But I was remembering now, real memories surfacing through years of suppression. Dad teaching me card tricks at the kitchen table. Mom singing off-key lullabies. The smell of her perfume when she tucked me in at night. A baby Emma taking her first steps while I cheered from across the room. I remember them, I said, the words tumbling out. I remember my real family. Margaret's face went white. Those aren't real memories. They're false implants, psychological manipulation. The scar on my knee, I interrupted. From falling off my tricycle in our driveway. You told me it was from a playground accident, but I remember now. Dad carried me inside while I cried, and Mom put Batman band-aids on it because she knew they were my favorite. Jamie, please. Emma's middle name is Rose, I continued, the memories flooding back faster now. After Mom's grandmother. She was born 3 months after I disappeared. I remember Mom being pregnant, remember putting my hand on her belly to feel the baby kick. Margaret was crying now, ugly sobs that shook her entire body. I gave you a better life. I gave you everything. You gave me a lie, I said, but my voice was gentle. A beautiful lie, but still a lie. Through the windshield, I could see more movement among the police vehicles. Someone was walking toward us, not an officer, but a man in civilian clothes. Tall, with graying brown hair and my stubborn cowlick. My father. David Collins. Margaret followed my gaze and let out a sound like a wounded animal. No. No, they can't just take you. 11 years, Jamie. 11 years of bedtime stories and birthday parties and Christmas mornings. That has to count for something. It does count, I said, surprising myself by meaning it. Those memories are real, even if everything else was built on lies. I won't forget the woman who raised me. Robert was watching the approaching figure with professional interest. That him? Your real dad? I nodded, unable to speak around the lump in my throat. David Collins looked older than in the newspaper photos, worn down by years of searching, but his walk was familiar in a way that made my chest tight. He looks like you, Robert observed. Or you look like him, I guess. Genetic similarity was one of the factors in your selection, Margaret said dully, her voice flat with defeat. I needed someone who could believably be my nephew. The casual admission hit me like a slap. Even my kidnapping had been calculated, planned down to genetic compatibility for a believable cover story. The megaphone crackled one final time. Margaret, your father is here too. Pastor Morrison from First Methodist. He's asking you to end this peacefully. Margaret's head snapped up. Daddy's here. For the first time since this confrontation began, she looked genuinely frightened. The mention of her father seemed to break something fundamental in Margaret. The gun slipped from her trembling fingers, clattering to the van's floor as she buried her face in her hands. He can't see me like this, she whispered. Pastor Morrison's daughter, the woman everyone trusted with their children for Sunday school. He can't know what I became. Through the windshield, I could see an elderly man in a clerical collar walking slowly toward us, flanked by Detective Winters. Even from a distance, the family resemblance was clear. Margaret had his kind eyes, though hers had been twisted by years of deception and desperation. Margaret Morrison, came a new voice through the megaphone, weathered and gentle. Sweetheart, it's Daddy. I'm here to bring you home. She looked up at me with eyes that seemed to see me clearly for the first time in 11 years. I'm sorry, Jamie. I'm so sorry for what I stole from you. Robert was already reaching for the door handle. This is where I get off, kid. For what it's worth, she did love you. In her own sick way, that was real. Where are you going? I asked, though I wasn't sure I cared about his answer anymore. To make a deal, he said simply. Information about the network in exchange for a reduced sentence. I've got names, locations, financial records going back 20 years. He stepped out of the van with his hands raised, immediately surrounded by officers. I could hear him talking rapidly, probably already negotiating his cooperation agreement. Margaret and I sat in silence for a moment, watching my father approach. David Collins moved carefully, like he was afraid I might disappear again if he moved too quickly. What do I say to him? I asked quietly. You say hello, Margaret replied. You say you missed him, even if you didn't know you missed him. You let him be your father again. She reached over and squeezed my hand, the same comforting gesture she'd used through scraped knees and bad dreams and first day of school nerves. And Margaret? I said. What happens to you? I go to prison. Probably for the rest of my life. She smiled sadly. But maybe that's where I can finally figure out how to be the person Daddy raised me to be. I opened the van door and stepped out into the cool mountain air. The assembled police officers watched me carefully, but nobody moved. This moment belonged to my family. David Collins stopped about 10 feet away, his eyes searching my face like he was memorizing every detail. He was crying openly, not bothering to wipe away the tears. Jamie. His voice cracked on my name. My God, look how tall you are. Hi, Dad. The word felt foreign and familiar at the same time. He opened his arms, and I walked into a hug that felt like coming home after the longest journey imaginable. He smelled like coffee and aftershave, exactly like the faded memory I'd carried without knowing it was real. Your mom's in the car, he said against my hair. Emma too. They wanted to give us this moment, but they're dying to see you. Over his shoulder, I could see Margaret being led away in handcuffs by Detective Winters. She turned back once, mouthing the words, I love you, before disappearing into a police car. Despite everything, I mouthed back, I know. Because that was the complicated truth I'd have to live with. Margaret Morrison had stolen my childhood and destroyed my family, but she'd also loved me the only way she knew how. Ready to meet your sister? Dad asked, pulling back to look at me. She's been practicing this conversation for 11 years. I nodded, finally ready to reclaim the life that had been stolen from me. Finally ready to be Jamie Collins again.